going into next year, I am actually terrified to take on more flips just because of the like market situation.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, it is the last day of the year. If you're listening to this, we recorded it a little bit early, but this is our December 31st annual wrap-up show. If this is your first time to Collecting Keys, welcome. This is the show by real estate operators for real estate operators. You can hear about what other people in the same industry are doing around the country so you can make more money learning from other people's mistakes and successes. And, we can all just kind of like compete against the real enemy here, which is those damn sellers who won't sell us their homes. So right on, guys. Well, welcome to the show. On this episode today, we're going to be doing a little annual wrap-up. And not necessarily for the show, but kind of our businesses in general, because that's really why most people are here. And so we're going to be diving into some of our major KPIs, some of the big wins that we had, some of the challenges that we faced, and what our goals are with our business going into 2025, with so many things with the economy potentially changing or getting interesting with new presidential administration, stuff going on in the wars. Should things like that matter? I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit today. But first time here, my name is Mike DeHaan with my co-hosts Dan Austin and Dylan Cook. And we are super stoked to dive into this today. So let's talk about some general KPIs first. And the main things that typically matter, right? Aside from, there's like revenue and all that sort of stuff, which is cool, but those are lagging indicators. And what I like to hear more about is leading indicators. So cost per lead, cost per deal, best marketing channel. What are you seeing over there in Cincinnati, Dylan, for those things?
Yeah. So cost per deal specifically, because that's probably what I follow most, is actually pretty low for me this year, especially compared to last year. So in 2023, it was just about 3,500. I was actually down a little bit this year, and my cost per deal is, I have it right here, $2,400. And that's kind of further broken down into like a cost per deal for SMS, and that really only counts for like the first half of the year because it kind of died off. Was around $2,700. Cold calling's $2,600, and my direct mail is by far the best at like $1,950,
which is crazy.
That's really cheap.
Like, why do you think? Because most people, we're talking direct mail, and this is us included, are like mid 3,000s. You think it's just like your market? Is it? Do you have like a strategy? You think it's because you're like a one-person operator, so there's nothing falling through the cracks?
Definitely, kind of all the above, really.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where I mostly just mail list stacks. Like it's not really the high equity people anymore. So there's already probably a more inherent level of motivation there.
Sure.
And I guess since I've been doing this so long, and the easier it gets as you go on is anyone who's from Cincinnati, if I get a deal in Madisonville, I know 2 or 3 guys that I can just text automatically and be like, hey, go check out this property for me. And they can give me their best number. And I can almost reverse wholesale at that point and then make my spread based on where I need to be. Versus maybe the more traditional method of lock it up, blast it out, see what you can do. So I would contribute to those 2 things. Is like, I think I know most of the major buyers in my market in their general respective areas. And I definitely am probably better at most people at follow-up. Like I will hound people. Yeah. And then probably to the point where I'm annoying for most people. And I think I'm first to come to mind for a lot of sellers that, hey, I didn't want to sell now, but I want to sell 6 months ago, or whatever it may be.
Yep.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I think also too, something that's understated with direct mail, and this is why we're a big proponent of it, is there is a like compound interest that builds with direct mail when you're mailing the same people over and over again. We've mapped this before. And typically if you start mailing a new list, it takes until about month 4 for your cost per lead to get to its lowest point. So it's always the highest in the first month, second month, a little bit lower. Third month, we tend to see a big jump. And then fourth month, it tends to get to like what the true cost per lead is for that area that you're marketing to. And so you do that for long enough and it just keeps your average a little bit
And
lower.
actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because one of the caveats to that number is, if I closed the deal, but I mailed it in 2022, I'm not necessarily tracking that, right?
Exactly,
so
right. And you're carrying it through, but it's still showing in your system as a direct mail lead.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And so I discount on when it closes and probably for the most recent, ad spend that we did, right? So that could skew the numbers down a little bit too.
Exactly. And you'll get people that don't even call you for a long time. Like we closed a deal this year. This is a few months ago. One was in Asia, in New Mexico, right? We hadn't sent anything down to New Mexico for over 18 months. And we just got a random call from this person that like found, honestly, at that point, a piece of litter that was sitting in, their mom's kitchen that died. Called us and was like, hey, do you want to buy this house? Sure. We pieced it together, made a $17,000 fee. Right.
Yeah.
But like they hadn't received anything from us since 2022 at that point, like so long.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. But those things do start to skew your KPIs a little bit.
Let me ask you this, Dylan. Looking at your numbers now, as you look backwards towards what you did this year, are you going to change any of your marketing methods going forward into 2025 just based on your cost per deal for each of your channels?
So I'd probably keep it the same. I mean, my cost per deal, and I would actually expect this to go up with more volume.
Mm-hmm.
But being the one-man show and being that next year, I've said publicly on the podcast, if I want to do 7 figures top line, I'm going to have to bring on probably an acquisitions person.
Mm-hmm.
But I already have a shit ton of leads in the CRM, and I would rather go more deep in Cincinnati than go to a different market. Mm-hmm. So I might just incorporate more mail. Instead of list stacking, you also do the high equity, people that could get you some deals. Mm-hmm. And I'll also probably try other channels, pay per lead, or because I don't do any of that right now. My 3 methods right now are just basically cold calling, direct mail, and it was SMS, but that's not even a thing anymore.
It is not. It's hard.
It's not. I know it's pretty much impossible.
To answer your question, I guess more inbound stuff versus more less outbound.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of tough because you look at these numbers and somebody that's got like a PhD in anything is going to say, well, 1,900 is cheaper than 2,700. You should just put more money there. That's not necessarily directly how it correlates, because you made mention to, like, if you spend more on mail, it's probably going to go up cost per lead because you're going to stretch out to less motivated people to get more pieces of mail out there. Mm-hmm. And then there's a little bit more inefficiencies as you get more and more leads coming in. Things start falling through the cracks. So your cost per lead, cost per deal will inevitably go up. But I think it's just looking at your numbers, the spreads are almost $1,000 apart, to where mail definitely is producing super well for you, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't think that'll go away. And I think the biggest thing, if I'm, now that I have 2 years of full data, right? We have 2023 and 2024. I will do this basically 3 more deals this year. And then the revenue is about a 14% year over year increase. But a lot of it is attributed to more of an exit strategy thing. Like I did 11 flips in 2024, where I only did 3 in 2023. And so that's that revenue difference in those deals is what was the biggest differentiator there.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So I guess comparison with ours. And so we had a big national operation for vast majority of the year. And then we started to scale it down about 4-ish months ago. And so for the sake of, I would say, keeping it relatable for people that are listening to this, we're going to focus on just our local market KPIs, which go back to not quite the full year, but back to March. And so for us locally, we had a total cost per deal of about $3,400, cost per lead $221. And the average profit per deal, almost all wholesale, was just over 20 grand. So not quite as efficient as you, Dylan, but not too bad overall. And direct mail was our core through and through, just like it has been forever. Just the most predictable for us. I mean, in September alone, we signed 10 off of just direct mail here locally. And so it's just like, and that's
nuts to me.
with running everything else. And the crazy thing is too, that was off of only a $12,500 spend locally up to that point. Well, I guess I can buy for that month. Yeah.
Like my wholesale revenue per deal is about 14, right?
Yeah.
And so you guys are kind of the market difference. So like our median price points is probably what attributes to that.
What's your median price point in your market?
That's probably like 250 to 300.
Oh shit. Yeah. So like our average, I think, is like 380 or something. Like
so
like a mean
mid-3s to 4.
Yeah.
Somewhere there. Well, the other thing to think about, so what did you say our cost per deal was, Mike?
3,400, 3,407 to be exact. Yeah.
What I was going to think about is like, if our cost per deal, say, is $1,000 more, then if you take like a 7 or 8x that kind of gets us from 15 to 22, 23,
It's true.
because that's typically our return on ad spend is like a 7 or 8x.
Yeah.
So that would also make sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the return on ad spend, obviously, if you're another marketer out here to track, that's probably one of the biggest KPIs you should track on top of cost per deal and revenue per deal. But I mean, ours is, because of that efficiency, ours is 850% or 8.5x.
Yeah, which is solid. I think that's where you really want to be, is like a single operator or like a small, like 2 or 3 man company. Like, you need to have some multiple above 1 because you have overhead.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you do need money in the bank if you want to start doing flips to increase your revenue. You need to be able to have that cost to carry the marketing. And so you got to have something. 6x I would go to say would be on the lower end of where you'd want to be. You're probably being not as efficient as you could be. And then as you get better, because like when you start out, this is the thing about the KPIs. They don't mean shit to you when you first start. Like even your first year, it's really hard unless you're benchmarking against somebody else that's experienced. But your return on ad spend sucks, because if it takes you like, what it was, 8 months for us, Mike, to get a deal, or 7 months for us to get our first deal, your return on ad spend after 7 months, 5 months of marketing, your return on ad spend, that's really terrible. And then it should belly out somewhere and get to an average probably after your first year. It's just hard to tell.
It is so hard to tell. And on that same note too, about like just the inefficiency when you're starting, also different of local versus if you're trying to do things virtually too, right? Like one of the reasons that we wound down our kind of big national team and started going local was because just a massive amount of like, I would say like waste and inefficiency that happens when you have things spread out super, super wide and you have a big team. And sure, you can be making more top line, but what ultimately Dan and I came to find was top line of the company was looking pretty cool. We were like 4-ish million, but the bottom line, we were making like nothing. So we're like, why are we even doing this compared to like the most profitable year that Dan and I ever had was when it was just us and 2 local guys on the team. And we were just, pumping money heavily into the local market, because then our profit margins were like 70-80% at that point, right? With this big national company, like we were pulling 25-ish% profit margins. We had a huge amount of waste that was going on. We had HR, we had salaries, we had all these other things. Missed opportunities because we weren't there to compete with the local competition. And at that point, like our cost per deal was pushing up over 4,500 and our deal size would be like 15. And so it's like just getting smaller with expenses getting bigger. It's just kind of is a hard place to be. And so something else to think about is
challenge,
like where you can be more efficient with all that.
And I was going to add to that, the challenge becomes with just this business in general is the how it scales. Like what efficiencies do you get with scale? Because you can only get to so big as like a wholesale operation or as a flip operation or as a wholesale flipping operation that also buys rental properties. Like you get so many inefficiencies that where you're like, oh, I'm making 80% profit margins, which is sick. Like that's sweet. But you're like, I want more. I want to make more. And then with more, you have to have more overhead, which drops you to 60 to 50 to 40. And then by the time you're down to like 20%, you're like, holy shit, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
For 20% profit margin, you end up finding that you sometimes, not all the time, but make similar amounts of money, but you're working a little bit more because now you're managing all the staff and you're trying to make them as good as you were.
Yeah, which is just
and if
impossible.
You're 7 or 8x on your return on ad spend, but your net is like 20% less. I mean, you're losing a lot in the delta between those two things.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
If I'm looking at my business too, like from a volume perspective, we did around 35 deals, but the wholesale revenue of that was accounted for like. So let me put it this way: out of all of the volume, wholesale deals were about 56% of that. But they only accounted for 40% of the revenue. Whereas flips are only a third of the volume, but accounted for 47% of the actual revenue. But going into next year, I am actually terrified to take on more flips just because of the like market situation. Yep. So like to Dan's point earlier, mathematically it would say, do more flips, just do more flips, figure out a way to do that. But I just, being an entrepreneur and a business owner that's like, I guess kind of in tune with the market, I would almost say that I would go against the grain, go against the math in this situation.
You gotta trust your gut.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Awesome. All right. Next question to do a little review. What is something that you learned or realized about your business that you didn't know going into this past year? So what's like your big kind of lesson that you learned being a business owner this year?
Oh man. So I'll say this is like, even after I've been doing this for 2 years and I've been proving it's works, there are still times where I'm like, I can't believe this is actually like, you can reliably send out mail and then like predict revenue on a consistent basis. And there now hasn't been a single month in over 25 months where I haven't done at least one deal. Right. Good. And so like, it kind of gives me the confidence where I'm like, okay, I actually am probably good at this and I can continue to do it and provide for my family. But I don't know, man. There's still just times where I'm like, I can't believe this is an actual business and you can make money doing this.
Yeah. It's a good one.
It is. Yep. It's kind of like a shock still.
Yeah.
You're like, holy shit, I'm making money on my own.
I can't believe someone just called me and they want to sell my house at 40% of what it's going to be worth.
Dude, I still think that sometimes.
That doesn't go away.
No, it really doesn't.
Yeah. But that does it.
Yeah.
I would say this is interesting because it's not like a new lesson, but it is definitely a lesson for me that as I was looking at this question, I was thinking like, what is new? Because you and I have done so many different things in this business and worked at all different levels of it. And we've kind of seen a lot. But really what it was I think gaining clarity as we stripped things down and went back to the basics and really how simple this business is. Like when you first start and you get into it, it's kind of complicated because you don't know your bookends. You got all these systems, all these things, all these sellers, all these buyers. You're trying to like make things work at a Dylan's point, just piece deals together so that you can always do a deal. And it doesn't feel like when you're starting out that next deal is actually out there, and it is. But for us, getting back to the basics, like in our local operation, granted, we do have some staff with the Collecting Keys brand and stuff that helps support us, but we don't really have any employees in our business that we need to have right now. And the business cycle of this is so simple. It's marketing and doing really freaking good at what you're doing when you're talking to sellers, and then being very proactive with your buyers to find buyers before you even have deals so that you can be ready to reverse wholesale, which Dylan mentioned earlier. When you know your buyers really well, I got right before the podcast, got a call from one of our acquisitions folks on the team saying, hey, I got this deal. What do you think? I'm like, well, we could try to pre-sell it, going through that, like who on my Rolodex is going to want that deal? Like those are the simple things. And really when you get back to the basics, it is that simple. And you don't need to overcomplicate shit. You don't need to over systematize it. You don't need to over SOP it. You just need standard frameworks. So
yeah, it's funny. Mine's almost along the same lines. But I would say the big thing that I learned is that sometimes the correct answer is to undelegate and to be willing to go in and get your hands dirty again, right? Which I feel like as a business owner, it almost like damages your pride a little bit, right? When you like have this team built out and you have all these roles and you have your org chart and you have all these different things. But what I noticed, and this is something in hindsight, I kind of realized while I was in Asia, was that I didn't really need to be involved in the business, which was fine. Like the real estate business anyway, but it also wasn't was a big reason why we weren't making very much money. Right. And then the crazy thing was when I came back and literally like on the first day back, I fired everybody. It was a really fun day back at work after vacation. Like I had a bunch of calls and I let pretty much everyone know that they're being let go. I think overall it was 12 people over the course of like 2 days. And I realized how little they were actually doing, which was weird because they always felt like they were busy, and how they had all these roles for things that didn't actually need to be there. And realistically, just kind of between the small team that we've kept and Dan and myself, we can do all those roles without needing to work like as much as we did years ago when we were filling those roles, because we're more experienced, systems are better, we understand kind of like priorities a little bit more. And so that's like a big challenge I would have for people is if you've grown like this big systematized process or you have this big team and it's just kind of not working, sometimes it's best just to nuke the thing and be willing to dive into your own business again and not be afraid to get to work. And you'd be surprised at how much easier it is than you think it's going to be, because you have this memory of doing that years ago, but your experience does compound with that. So,
yeah, I think ego's the enemy is the way to summarize that.
So much, dude. Right. And honestly, like that's a big challenge I've had with like Collecting Keys and, our scale community and things like that is I spent so much time over the last couple of years, like trying to create content, do the Instagram thing. I was doing like YouTube and all sorts of stuff. I never really liked it, but I felt like it was necessary to grow like the scale community. And then when I got back, I was like, or even while I was gone, I was like, I kind of just don't care about any of that. So we stopped it. And the crazy thing is I've had more engagement and interest in scale, and, you know, people wanting to like know kind of what we do without making this like bullshit, like without doing the content creator thing, which I really think is just like such a nonsensical business. Like the more that I've thought about this, that it's what people do when they don't have any skills, right? Or when they're like so rich that they have nothing else to do anymore, right? But everyone else that's like a professional content creator and that's the core of their business, I'm like, that's because you're kind of a fucking loser. Like honestly, like you're just like you understand the lessons that you've been taught by people and you parrot them, but you don't really have like a lot of meat to back it.
Yeah. Or my favorite part of this is the coach jumpers. They'll do scale. They'll do the you know, all the other masterminds that are out there, and they know all the right things to say. Yeah. But as they're under experience, they don't actually do anything.
Yeah. This is I found out I hated this probably about 6-8 months before Mike did. Like I was like, Mike will define the moment probably because I told our guy that doesn't work for us. I was like, I fucking hate this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to take a break. And so Mike obviously put more heart and effort and did a better job than me during that period of time. But it's one of those things with like, it's so when you get into that content creation to try to like drive a brand and you start learning about it, you start seeing how every single person on the internet is trying to do the same thing.
And they're all liars.
It's all the same shit.
And they're all liars.
And they're all trying to follow the same shtick. They're all trying to follow the next content thing. And the thing that I've found with content creators, the internet of social media and YouTube and all that stuff, is that there are people out there that have really great novel ideas for being a creator of something, of content. Really is what it is. It's entertainment. And those people stand out because they have really great, it's just a unique novel idea that sticks out on the internet. Like, that's awesome. Or they're a super hot chick that just works out in yoga pants.
Yeah.
So let's get to the real reason, Dan. You're just not attractive enough.
I am 100% not attractive enough.
Absolutely. I mean, like you're joking, but that's like a real thing, right? Like people can't lie and say that's not man or woman, right? It is if you are a prominent picture. That's why even, you know, like Ryan Pineda had like orange hair and shit for a while, right? He was like, that was his way of standing out. But
real quick, too, what I guess another one I'd add to like lessons learned is don't underestimate human capital. And what I mean by that is your NOAA guys, especially if you're flipping, your drywall guy, your plumber, an insurance agent, property man. Like if you just have a Rolodex of people you can rely on for every aspect of this business, because the hardest part of real estate sometimes is relying on other people, then that is like unquantifiable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so important because that's what makes this. That's what makes this business easy and not frictionless. You know what I mean? When you have, and everybody that is listening that has had that contractor, for example, where you don't have to feel like it's just hard every time you talk to them, or you have to do so much just to support them, versus the guy who just shows up and is like, yeah, man, I did all this stuff for you. Does that make sense? You're like, wow, that was so much easier.
Yes.
Same thing with people in your network. When you have a really good buyer and you could throw something over the fence and be like, hey, I think I can get this to you for $250. Are you in? And they're like, yeah, I'll do this. And you know, when they say that they're going to buy it. Yeah. Like, that is the buyers you want to connect with.
Or a title company that actually talks to sellers.
Like, right.
Yeah. That makes phone calls for you, that connects people.
Yes.
Yeah. Like after we worked on that with all these national title companies, and I'm working on a lot of the TC Dispo stuff right now, back to Spokane with our title gal that we actually started with, and how much work they do compared to some of these other title companies. You're like, oh my God, this is so easy. I can literally just send you an email and you can infer things because it's common sense. And then you also take action without me telling you. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. There'd be days where it's like 24 hours before it's closed. Like, hey, how things look? I'm like, oh, did you schedule the seller to come in? I'm like, no, it's your job. Like, why would I do that?
Why would I do that?
I know. We would get that all the time. Literally, they'd be asking, when's your seller coming to sign? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't talked to them in 2 weeks. Like, what the fuck?
Covet those people. Buy your title people coffee, flowers, whatever their brand is. I would ask this question. What do you guys think if you're starting out, you're doing little deals here and there? How much percentage of your time should be spent on building that team, like finding new people, even though maybe you're doing a flip right now, you've got a title company, you've got all the pieces in place, but it's not perfect yet? 20%?
I don't know. it depends on your personal situation and if you actually have like capital like set aside where if you like need that or not. But I would get better at sales and assigning and buyers first, probably above all else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you would worry about your team, your people.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just kind of like walking before you run. And then once you have those
let me
people
ask
in
you
place,
this though, like you kind of have to know those people, right? Because
you
can't
learn them
assign
as you
anything.
go. It's like,
yeah.
it's like,
That's what I mean is like, what would you do like with that? Would you go to meetups? What percentage of time would you do? Would you call people ahead of time to kind of connect with them? Because like, hey, I heard you were a buyer. I'm going to have some deals coming. Or would you literally just market, get someone on contract and try to figure it out?
the latter.
Okay. Yeah. It's fair. I mean, that's how we did it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it's the way to do it because it feels harder and it's scarier. And when you're under contract and you're under the gun, it forces you to figure things out rather than like, I'm trying to prepare.
Value.
Yeah.
And not the guy that shows up and is like, I would love to take you to coffee and pick your brain on what deals you like. You're like, I like them all.
Yeah.
As long as they're the
right.
price.
I get that all the time too.
I know.
And it's like, what's your buyback? I'm just send me everything. I'll tell you if it's
Yeah.
a deal or not. Like,
Yeah. And then they proceed to send you the worst they've ever seen. You're like, no, that's not it. And then you either offend them and never hear from them again, or they're like, okay, I'll get better next time.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. What was your favorite deal of the year, Dylan? This can be a good lesson that you learned. This can be a big win. This can be one that was just like interesting for some reason.
Yeah, no, favorite deal it was actually kind of recent. We had it was a foreclosure lead, but the gentleman had passed away. But he was still, they did like a DIY divorce. Okay. And so even though they were technically divorced, the wife didn't have rights to the property. The daughter did. The daughter who wasn't with the ex-wife, not trying to get too convoluted, but basically we had a whole bunch of probate and title issues. Ended up getting it to the rightful owner, which was the daughter, and who was like pregnant, expecting twins. She's like 22 years old, and she was able to walk away with like $40K. And then we had turned around and were able to flip it in like 3 months, and we made like $90K.
Nice.
And so it was this like literally like a win for everybody. It took a lot of work on the front end, but this ended up working out best for everybody.
Perfect. That's a great
What a
one.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good deal.
Yeah.
It was the most revenue I've ever had in one deal.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about yours, Dan?
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of revenue. Mine is not a single deal. I was looking at our list of deals that we've done here locally, and what I think my favorite thing that we did this year from a deal standpoint was all of the like JV type stuff we did.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, there's actually some awesome monetary wins where we won more than once on a deal. But like for the JV deals that just came into our system, where we were able to work with a local, competitor to make a deal work because, we were both working a deal. We decided to collaborate on it and, work together on it as opposed against us, or just people that call us and say, hey, I've got this deal. Can you help me dispo this? And it's a big core part of our business that we're focused on going into 2025 is how can we do more of those deals where, people need our support because we have a lot of experience in our market, or we run into other people on deals and we can make something work that would take nothing and create something, because that also drives your cost per deal down, which is what we ultimately want to do. And they're essentially free deals usually.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, those are great. And those are also why it's so important to have a good reputation and not be a dirtbag, because otherwise those opportunities won't even come to you. Right.
Exactly. And let people know that you're out there, right? As we came back into Spokane, there was a lot of buzz. People were like, oh, Mike and Dan are back. Oh, my, what's going to happen here? And people are calling and picking up the phone, hitting me up on social media. And that's when things just happen. Like deals, they just pop. And I know like, it's kind of funny because this is a good example of why I bring this up. I got a DM from a guy that was like, hey, I heard you guys are back in town. I'm like, yeah, we're back in town, man. We should have coffee one day. Yeah, we should definitely have coffee one day. Cool. And then we got a phone call from a meetup I did this year. A guy referred me to some lady that needed to sell her house fast. He's like, oh, Dan Austin's the guy to do that. Right. Cause I spoke at their meetup. She calls, that same day we go out there, figured out, get it under contract. I DM the dude that had DM'd me. I'm like, hey, I got a deal if you want it right now. Really? Sweet. Went out there, freaking loved it. He's like, I just did one 2 blocks away. This is the exact same house. I'll do it again right now. Boom. I think we made like 10 grand on that thing.
Easy.
Just from 2 people knowing I was in business here in town. I didn't have to spend any money on marketing. I didn't have to like beat down anybody's door. It was just like connect, and then boom, done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. And so the one that stands out to me, and this one's kind of an interesting one. So we have this new lending business that we've had it for a little while, hard money lending business, but we're growing into like this co-lending model where people can basically like invest with us and like buy parts and notes, which is pretty cool. What that's allowed us to do has been to expand like our lending capabilities kind of more than we have in the past. And we did this one deal. It was a small mobile home park that we assigned. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I'll just use like basically easy math. So we assigned it for like $300,000 and we got a $30,000 assignment fee. But what we did is we actually provided the hard money loan for the buyers. And so we basically provided them a loan, right, at our purchase price. And then we, at whatever the price was, we had them pay without down payment, they were at $270,000. We collected our $30,000 fee. Right. And so basically they're paying interest on their full loan amount, but we recover $30,000 of the principal on the assignment fee at closing. Right. So we're collecting interest at a higher rate than principal has out. And I think the total amount of interest at that is like 3% or 4% more. So it really maximizes the return for the lending company while also making it easier to get a deal done on the wholesale side with a deal that would have been kind of tricky for them to get lending on because it's a little mobile home park, but also because we underwrote the deal to begin with. If they do screw it up and I got to take it back, I'm not upset about that because I already liked it in the first place. I was in a contract.
Mm-hmm.
So as you kind of grow and you get more capital and you understand real estate a little bit more, there's so many ways you can make more money off of one deal. And that's something that's been really interesting to me sort of going into this next year. But
I knew you'd pick that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's
That's
just
good.
like, gets me excited.
It's one of those things like, well, one of the things that we've always tried to figure out, or we're always trying to figure out is like, how can you drive revenue into your business without having to spend money? Like, how can you get larger, sums of money on the bottom end without having to add in, cost of goods or marketing or something like that? And the lending piece is really fascinating. The thing Mike and I have found out about lending over the years is you run out of money super fast.
So fast.
You just, it doesn't matter because like somebody finds out you're doing loans, you do another loan, you do another loan. You could spend $1 million in a week on a few deals. And now people are knocking on your door and like, dude, I wish I had more money for you. And so you go out and you raise some money, you bring it in. And then the problem is you deploy that money. So with the new model that we're trying to use, which Mike mentioned is like co-lending, where we can be a co-lender with multiple investors on the same deal. Everybody's in first position, kind of like almost like a group. I would say you could, buy $20,000 of a note, $50,000 of a note, and then you still get the same interest rate as if you had the whole note. But now we're able to bring on other people as investors to be able to help us, originate these private notes for all these investors. And then if we can do it for all the deals we're wholesaling locally that we know are good deals because we're not shitbirds. Like some people out there love to wholesale deals to people that they're going to fail on and you only sell them a deal once. But if we underwrite good deals and we sell them good deals, then we can loan on good deals and have good risk, risk aversion on it.
Exactly. So, yeah.
I need you guys to raise about $250,000 by in 2 weeks.
I know. I'm trying. I'm trying.
We're trying.
Yeah. But by the time this episode comes out, you'll need it. So it'll be too late. But awesome. I know we're coming up on time. You got to go do daddy duty to Dylan. So last question to round out today's show. The biggest thing you're going to change going into 2025?
I'm going to hire somebody.
I can't believe you've been like this long without doing it. That's like shows a lot honestly about your skill
I have my
set.
assistant.
Yeah.
I have my assistant and that has helped a ton. She does like transaction coordination, property management, like all that kind of stuff. So that's helped. But I need to hire a salesperson, especially now that I have a 3-month-old at home and I miss being, I don't sleep. I'd run on caffeine. I know that's not healthy. So
try drugs like Adderall and stuff like that. I heard that's pretty good.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Talking to the ex-pharmacist. That's a good idea.
People.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest thing. I'm going to hire somebody.
Yeah.
Hire an acquisitions person.
That's going to be your change is hire an acquisition person. I feel like I remember earlier this year, that was kind of a thing that was like a goal of yours. And you did hire somebody, but they quit or you fired them the first day?
They showed up to the sales training on day one or they didn't show up at all.
They didn't show up at all. They fucking ghosted it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Mike texted me. He's like, you guys supposed to be in here. I'm like, oh, that's fucking great.
Yeah. You're like, that's a good way to start off.
Yeah. That's funny. What about you, Dan?
What am I going to do different going into next year? I'm going on the theme of simplifying, and I am going to try to do more with less. We've been kind of running and gunning. So like, how can I allocate my time better? I don't know that I'm going to hire anybody. I don't know that I have any desire or need to hire people right now. I've just kind of gotten in my head that when a business gets to a certain size, you need to hire people, and it's kind of like the mechanics of it. It's just going to happen when it happens. So I'm not worried about hiring people. A lot of people, Dylan, you're in this situation where it's like, hey, I want to do more. I need to get off this hamster wheel. I got to hire somebody. For me right now, I don't feel like that hamster wheel exists, but coming off of a busy, I don't know, we were freaking tangle busy, like just entangled in a lot of things, 2022, 2023, 2024. It's been wild. And so I am going to do more with less and try to allocate my time more appropriately. And I got a big calendar that I'm trying to figure out, like the big chunks of time and where they need to go, and like family time versus business time and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of that's what I'm going to do differently.
There you go. Perfect. Right on. And then on the big picture company side, I think for our brand, I guess for our company, I'm going to be focusing a lot more on the actual brand piece locally and really trying to expand and grow that. I think that now versus previous years, the brand matters a lot more with like a real estate company than it did a few years ago, where everyone was kind of just like throwing stuff out there. No one really stood out, right? And so, it was kind of just like who had the best sales team or whatever. But now I think that having a strong brand that is recognizable, that sellers can easily find reviews for, track record for, looks professional, has a good reputation. I think that matters a ton now. And that's something that like people that we know that have done really well have really focused on. So that's going to be a huge focus on us for next year. Is it going to be less like just targeted marketing and more like how can we build this umbrella that everyone that is a potential motivated seller should be able to find out about us super, super easily without us needing to do targeted marketing, right? And so we can like just build that, I guess, that brand piece here locally. So that'll be a new thing for us. I already have all the pieces sort of lined up to start doing that. And I'm excited to sort of see how that comes together. But I think it'll pay compound interest pretty quickly. But so sweet.
That's just, like you said, the more people that know what you do, those are going to be free leads that come in.
Exactly.
Free as in like, you set it up once and then it kind of just pays on itself.
Yep.
Yeah. And you can, I strongly believe you can go out there and be a professional brand, but show up as the guy next door.
I think so too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think could be a dichotomy where you're loosey-goosey, shady wholesaler going in, knocking on people's doors saying, I would love to buy your house. Thanks for calling me. And this over the top, we buy ugly houses franchise. Right. I think that's the two kind of dichotomies where you may be worried that some people will choose the other one or the other, but I still think you can have that really good local, nice brand. And then when you show up, you're still just the guy next door that's flipping houses.
Yep.
Yeah. You know how many people are, if I take an inbound call, which I still do, and they're like, my name is on the letter and I say, hey, this is Dylan on the phone. Like that is all, it cuts a lot of people off by surprise.
Really?
Because they expect it to be somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I wouldn't expect it to be you. That's weird as fuck. Why don't you have a call center at least? What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
The call center sucks.
Yeah.
But
they do.
That's why your cost per deal is so low, dude. Like honestly, you have to be on all the time, but you're making up that money right there because you're dropping zero balls.
They like you.
Yeah.
You're good looking. That's why.
Thanks.
Yeah,
you should try social
they
media.
could see me through the phone.
If you were a hot chick, your cost per
it.
deal would be half of what it currently is. Just think about that.
Oh, good. I think the surgery is just only a couple grand. So
it's cheap if you do it yourself.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get out of here.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. That's our overview of the year for you. So you guys have a happy new year, and going into next year, start to see a couple different changes with the show. We're going to be leaning a lot more into, I would say, kind of like the stuff that we're doing week to week, and just getting a little bit more focused on, I would say, like not necessarily educational details, but what like actionable details and what's actually working for us and everything else. So expect a couple changes here. They'll be good. So if you have anyone that is interested in growing their real estate businesses, or it's just operators and just looking for some good guys to listen to who are actually playing the game, share the show. It really helps us a ton the more that you tell people about it. And you guys have a great New Year's, and we'll talk to you guys next week. All right. See ya.
See y'all.
See ya.